nail salons, barber shops, a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the bars in this area. Many of you already know, a lot of our community depends on small businesses. A lot of them work in small businesses. And so I did want to take some time to particularly address those concerns. I left the agenda as open as possible to try and ensure that everyone who brought forward a different concern, whether it be for housing needs or human services needs, has the time to try and bring that up now. What I do just want to point out is that I particularly set up a listing of things that I think are important to think about tonight when we're talking about each of these individual issues. One is addressing the rise in unemployment, as I just mentioned. Two, addressing the needs of small and mid-sized landlords, often responsible for overseeing our affordable housing portfolios in the community. Three, addressing the needs of New York renters who may not pay rent this month in particular. Four, addressing the needs of immigrants, particularly those that were not included in the federal relief package, and particularly given really just the option to use unemployment insurance and other individual human services that are being offered throughout our government. And lastly, I'd just like to mention really just trying to find, we need to find ways to try and address particularly our homeless population. What many of you might have already seen over the past few weeks with regards to the news is that a lot of our professionals within the healthcare sector are most worried about the homeless. Their individual just vulnerabilities at this moment are being exposed to such an extent that we have not seen before. And there are many that are specifically calling for a lot more of medically appropriate shelter to be put into place by funding used by our government. So with that said, I just want to open it up to everyone now and see what is some of the main concerns that some of you have already raised. I will be taking stacks, so please just, feel free to just raise your hand or start. Osi?
So how they're going to address the issue of homeless getting into the shelter? Is there any mechanism? Are they getting masks? Are they getting gloves? Because they're getting in and out of shelters on a daily basis. So that's like almost like even if they were not exposed before, they're now really exposed. Like some of them may expose other people that were not exposed before. So is there any mechanism? How does it work now with that issue with the virus?
And sorry, I just want to clarify. Are you meaning to ask how does the homeless shelter services work?
Yeah. Now yes. What do they do in order to make sure that homeless getting into the shelter are not infecting other homeless if they're not infected already?
So right now, what we've and I do apologize. I wasn't sure, if you're going to be sticking with us for the committee. There was a few links that I sent out earlier in the week. Okay. One of those individual links was particularly focused on the homeless shelters and what's been happening. One of the earliest deaths was actually within a homeless shelter. One of the main focuses that a lot of the advocates have been talking about is that with the current setup of a lot of our shelters, they're more so focused on dorm settings in some of them, not all, but some. When you have a dorm setting, it is particularly making more families vulnerable as a result, with there not necessarily being, dividers or spaces really just that are allowing for more breathable access, and also not to mention, the opportunity to just take shelter. It's making it difficult for people to essentially stay healthy. And so there has been some different calls now by different officials. Some are asking that there is relocation of a lot of our individual shelter recipients. Some are particularly asking that there is put in place some new, temporary sheltering just to try and provide more space for these individual families. and particularly to have many of those recipients being removed from those dormitory style shelters. That has been some of the conversation that we've been hearing so far. Um, has anybody else been reading in other publications or even across other portions of just the media in general about other alternatives that have been proposed?
I actually have. So I saw it through social media today, but this is more so on behalf of the shelter workers, right? Where they're not being provided with adequate protective equipment, and so they're right now trying to call for Governor Cuomo to provide for more, masks and stuff like that, because a lot of their protective equipment is coming out of pocket. And so yeah, so there's a huge push, I guess, right now for that. I read that somewhere today. I can't cite the source, but yeah, I did read something about that, and I did read your article about the homeless shelters and the measures that they're trying to take at that end. But what I see is just that every day something this whole virus is something ever changing. So like things are every day there's something that's new that's being brought up, and like there's just a new population that's just not being addressed, and so it's interesting to see how this is all kind of coming to fruition. Something that I don't want to stray away too much from it, but it does impact the shelter system too, somehow, some way. Is I learned yesterday, I didn't even know that the corner project is not mobile right now, so they're not doing work, and that somehow and that's gonna that's rippling into our community, because folks are now. I mean, I don't necessarily know how it's gonna impact when it comes to COVID, but just let alone providing a space for those individuals is going to be, it's going to cause a ripple in our community as well. So something to think about, just something to think about overall. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? To be clear, human services is oftentimes thought of just, what's HRA, what's SNAP. And really the thing is here that there are a number of services that are particularly helpful for humans, particularly for just populations in general across the city. What we oftentimes find is that there's not necessarily a better understanding of how human services particularly can help vulnerable populations at this time, or even really in their most vulnerable moments. But I do just want to point out that, one of the biggest factors that came out of the federal relief bill right now, the $2 trillion bill, was a focus on removing worker requirements. Many of you might have heard a few months back that the federal government was instituting worker requirements in order to receive a lot of human services, particularly when you're applying for SNAP or even public assistance in general. Those have actually been removed. It would just be unfathomable to believe that you could tell somebody in order to receive such benefits that you have to work in the middle of this crisis. That I personally was, very, quite frankly, shocked to see just coming out of Washington. The passage of the $2 trillion bill was just something that a lot of people thought was going to be a bit more focused on really just the welfare of a lot of the corporations that were, yes, losing a great deal of money now in our economic downturn. But this was particularly very helpful for a lot of the families that are going to be really looking towards assistance where possible now. Did anyone happen to see the articles regarding particularly those individuals that are receiving domestic violence services or domestic violence survivor services? So there has been a great deal of concern about people essentially being, of course, afraid to leave their homes. The reason why this is important to address is because for those that are currently already dealing with some sort of domestic violence in their homes, what this very well means is they're even more intimidated. Their abusers can actually really threaten them, telling them that they would push them out of their homes if they don't necessarily, comply with a lot of the things that typically is really the dynamic of an abusive relationship. Um, a lot of the individual advocates that have been talking right now about this particular population, they've been trying to make sure that they are also advocating for more resources being devoted towards the hotlines, such as those that are set up by Safe Horizons. Many of you might have heard about the organization, but they are pretty much one of the largest organizations focused on domestic violence survivors and offering services in times in which they are particularly within really just the reach of an abusive relationship. This is very important because oftentimes you do find that, yes, there are often a lot of low-income individuals, particularly those that are most vulnerable economically, financially, and particularly a lot of individuals that do experience domestic violence are children. Children don't necessarily have the opportunity to choose really what their living situations often like. They don't necessarily have economic freedom. And so this is very important to try and ensure that we're also making sure that those individuals that are experiencing these troubles are also being reached out to at this very time, finding out where they can find refuge if they do so, seek it. Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns about what I've just mentioned here? I promise I don't think I put the mute on everybody. Okay, well, with regards to unemployment, I think that's the biggest part of many people's concerns with respect to human services. I did put together a bit of information here. I just wanted to note that what was found most recently by the State Department of Labor is there was 7.8 million calls by New Yorkers seeking unemployment benefits in the last week alone. 80,000 filed for unemployment in the week ending March 21st. What the NYU Furman Center had found was that the nail salons, beauty parlors, barbershops, hotels, and entertainment venues have been particularly cited as experiencing really the greatest amount of losses at this time for their own workers. According to NYU Furman's Research Center, I might have spoke a little bit about this before, but they had actually been showing that roughly 1/3 of the 3.2 million households in New York City draw their primary income from someone who is vulnerable to income loss. 34% of workers in the city are at risk of losing income, and about 48% of Hispanic wage earners, 38% of Black wage earners, as well as 35% of Asian or Pacific Islander wage earners were in vulnerable occupations in the year 2018. I guess one of the last statistics that I should point out here is that currently the Federal Reserve is projecting that there will be a 30% unemployment rate as a result of the coronavirus. We cannot necessarily speak enough to this. Yes, the unemployment benefits have been raised significantly on the federal level. What I think is the greatest level of concern about this is that the federal rate was not necessarily that significant with regards to the cost of living here in New York State, particularly within New York City. One of the major concerns that can be raised about this is that it does not necessarily meet the needs for many of the individuals within our state. What this would entail for then many of the families that are going to really exist on this income for the next few months is that the state might have to very well step in if it intends to ensure that people can, potentially pay rent, potentially pay their utilities, potentially pay, the countless, costs that are associated with just their daily lives. Any questions?
I think they there was a conversation about it on the news today, this afternoon on the Blackfish channel was that, but the thinking is that it may take about 2 years to get the economy back to work. So it may be more than just a few months, and it's going to take some time.
Certainly.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, the shock of this whole thing, it took the economy to like recession levels in a matter of like a month, right? And so, and recession meaning like kind of borderline, more or less like what happened in 2008 ish. And some folks are trying to now compare it to like the Great Depression. Not saying that we'll get there, but just drawing comparables to see like if market will react similarly. God forbid, of course. But I think the takeaway here, with regards to that is like what systems will be put in place to help the populations, as Ariel mentioned, that are the most vulnerable, right? So, and like the folks that if you know that will depend on a job and that will then now go and rely on public assistance, Medicaid, and et cetera, where right now our president is trying to take away funding from these sources, from these government assisted programs, where I can totally see that there's going to be a jump in the need for funding, and the need for like again back to Medicaid, because that's the one that I think is being discussed right now, not necessarily following like what the outcome is or was, but I know like there was discussion on it this week where like folks are going to rely on Medicaid because their employers are giving them health insurance, and now there's a lack of employment, and so that's something to think about, or I guess discuss, whether it be either in support of like trying to seek more Medicaid funding or try to push, when we speak about the $2 trillion that is being in the stimulus package and deal, that's something that I didn't necessarily see as a highlight too, or like folks are not really discussing that, so yeah.
Yeah, and given what's really happening with unemployment, I mean, a large number of American families rely on their employment in order to receive insurance. I can even just point out that for individuals who lose their jobs all of a sudden, when they get a letter informing them really of just the protections of COBRA, but how much they would need to pay in order to ensure that they continue their insurance even after they lose their job. Oftentimes you'll find that even most basic insurance plans, you're talking about your typical HIP, HMO, GHI, those are running families, or rather even just individuals, $700 a month. This is something that's very costly. It's not something that you can easily ensure that people will be able to meet all of a sudden.
Absolutely, it's like unsustainable kind of. So something that again, I like seeing it's going to impact people because this is a crisis that's like health oriented too. So it's just not like it's just sheer again back to 08, where's the housing crisis. Don't get me wrong, that's terrible as well, because it's an essential need. I look at I view healthcare as an essential need as well. But this right now is a health epidemic, right? It's a public health crisis. And the one thing that's being kind of taken away is Medicaid, right? Or is being this assistance that's supposed to be to help people that cannot afford Medicaid, right? So yeah, again, I don't know, I guess what, from a local level, like what processes need to be taken or like what we can do, but I do think that there's a dire need for Medicaid assistance or just like more Medicaid advocacy to like not necessarily defund it, but just like at the bare minimum keep it afloat to where it was last year, 2 years ago, and even more so. I would advocate for more, of course, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does anyone else have any points they also wanted to make here?
Something that's concerning to me is I had multiple conversations today with people in different areas, people who serve in the area of advocating for people who are unemployed, people who are incarcerated, people who are dealing with health issues and housing issues. And I'm hearing a similar thread throughout those conversations, which is that there are people who there's like a black hole as far as what the dynamic is that's occurring with them because of the fact that their unemployment may be such that they were never on the books with their unemployment. They may be self-employed. How do they report what they intended to make when it's self-employment that is not gauged by any entity other than themselves and their own production? As well as the fact that there are undocumented people in our communities that are not, on our radar. And we still, something that I began to work on this board was attempting to create a tool to be able to effectively push out information to as many people, but also to be able to pull information back in so we have a better idea of what the trends are and how people are truly being impacted, because I feel like the data that we are looking at on a regular basis doesn't tell the full story. And in a crisis such as what we're experiencing now, that black hole of data can serve to create a bigger public health issue for the rest of us, and not just those people that are impacted that we don't see. And so that's something that to me, quite honestly, is just very frustrating. And there's been a tremendous uptick for me personally because of the type of advocacy that I do, of people reaching out to me with concerns of all sorts of things. People who don't have enough food to feed their family, but aren't able to go to HRA for whatever reason. The unemployment situation, people who are unemployed, but don't qualify for standard unemployment because of the way that their job, like they may be a freelancer or an artist or something of that nature. So I feel like there is a across the board, many agencies that normally would support people who are affected by this. There are many people that don't qualify across the board for many of those services. So honestly, I don't even know where to begin with that, because part of the issue is the structure of how the programs are already exist. So.
I agree. So like I think we spoke about this a while ago, Aisha, when you were chair, right? Where there's this, as you mentioned, like there's this gap for folks that like are not necessarily, like, for example, right? Medicaid, you can't have more than 2,500 in your bank account or something like that, right? And you can't, surpass this like certain threshold of income. I can't remember the number specifically, but it's somewhere around 800 to, I think it's like $825 a month or something like that. And so like at the bare minimum, like, I mean, not at the bare minimum, but like, I've had in the past, I've had cases when I was more, when I would like deal with social services and deal with actually manage cases myself. Like I remember having patients that had they would make $950 a month, and so their surplus was $120 something a month. They can't even afford, let's say, rent, and so they can't afford rent. So like you have to like work around these loopholes to try to, and loopholes meaning like, okay, there's a Medicaid spend down. So like, okay, how I used to have the loophole for him was 1 month we pay the 125 or whatever the surplus was. We that month you see all your doctors, your specialties, your PCP, everything. You get refills for your medications for the next 3 months, and so at the following month we cancel it. Like the end of the month we cancel it for the next month, so that way he could be able to afford again rent, and this is rent obviously. He was living in housing that rent was stabilized, but his rent was like $900 something, so his income didn't even equate to it. he had to have a family member, help support him and whatnot. That goes to show you a case where this man is not working, living off of $900 something a month, and he still is in that black hole. Let alone folks, as Aisha has mentioned, where like there are people that are freelancers or people that are self-reporting their own income, and if they're falling into these black holes or these gaps rather, like who provides them the support, and like how much are they paying for these services that right now that they're it's needed more than ever, right? Like I think about my barber, right, where he right now is shut down, can't do anything. But I don't, but depending on like the money in his bank account, like or whatever, he can't necessarily apply for certain benefits. And I'm sure like it's a struggle on its own, but and I know as much as he's a hustler, meaning that he tries to do what he has to do to make things happen. That only goes so long, that only goes so far, and that's just that's one case. But I'm sure that there's so many cases, especially right now, where people are not receiving the support that they need.
And actually, I just wanted to ask you, because I know you have spoken a little bit about your friends that worked with the Corner Project,
Yeah.
individuals that were particularly receiving those services from them. And I think I heard recently they're not able to go outside. The same individuals that are working in those mobile vans, they're not able to go outside. They're not able to really interact with these individuals. The folks that were working for the Corner Project, they relied on really the spending that's dedicated towards healthcare services in our community. Is that fair to say?
So I think they're grant funded for the most part, as far as I know. They grant funded for the most part. So I don't, and yeah, some come from DOH funds, some come from DOMH funding, others come from, I can't remember funding, but for like harm reduction and so on and so forth, like NIRE and stuff. I mean, they're collaborating with NIRE. But I think that I actually reached out to two folks. One works in the Bronx, another works in the Corner Project, because I received the email in my hospital that provided me with like safety measures and like how to like help people with that are like safety measures for folks that are using right now, actively using, and like how to like mitigate mitigate risk during these COVID times. And so I shared it, but I never heard back from my friend at the Corner Project. So I don't necessarily know what that is looking like right now. So I may have to reach out to him personally, like on the phone or something. Yeah. So I think I don't necessarily know how it's impacting them entirely in terms of like when it comes to medical with medical. But I do know that that I'm seeing an increase of people in different places. For example, seeking kind of like shelter in like banks, seeking shelters in different like pockets in the neighborhood that are open, especially because right now everything is kind of closed, right? So I see banks as one of the bigger like kind of temporary shelter places for people that are street homeless or like IDU drug users. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely one of the things that I think I mean, I'm thinking about the Corner Project right now because I'm also wondering, well, if they're not necessarily doing their typical role, interacting with the public, does that then mean also for them that they could not necessarily be working at this very moment?
Well, again, like, so I think it's being that it's grant funded, I think there's leniency there, and there's some type of understanding. Again, I can't speak for them, but I would expect that there's some type of leniency to given the COVID crisis that they wouldn't, that there's like the demand for deliverables wouldn't be there. But fortunately, grant funded programs are, money set in stone already. Not necessarily, whereas like Medicaid revenue producing, where that's a little different. But yeah, again, if I'm not mistaken, they're very grant funded based.
So, and also for a lot of these institutions that are grant based, that's a temporary block of time in which they have a guarantee of something. Once that period ends, then it's kind of really up in the air. And I think a lot of, actually this brings me to kind of another point here, with a lot of the nonprofits that are particularly now serving our communities that rely on the grant, rely particularly on charity, rely on individual agencies having funding available. This is particularly something that's going to affect many individuals that work in small institutions or organizations such as nonprofits. One of the things that I had wanted to bring up as well was actually related to an article that I shared with everyone. It was particularly about how nonprofits are not necessarily faring well in the midst of all this really confusion across the entire state, because of really just agencies having to now look at their own finances a bit more in deeper detail, and really try and find ways to cut back in certain ways. Some nonprofits may not necessarily be expecting to continue getting the same level of resources. One of the things that I was trying to mention the other night was that the comptroller is, particularly responsible for what's going to happen with our budget. When I was talking to Mariela, I actually wanted to learn a little bit more about what he's also been mentioning. He's already expecting there to be a 7% decrease in the revenue for the city of New York. This, of course, then affects a lot of our agencies. For really just what is going to be our approach in the future, that's going to be depending on what's going to happen. But the comptroller has already then been calling for a 4% decrease in spending for each of our city agencies. This is not just going to be about the agencies themselves, but particularly those nonprofits that work alongside them to offer our city services. I think it's just very important to note here what's going to end up happening now.
Would you know if is this the comptroller? I didn't necessarily know this, the 4% peel back, but is the comptroller, is this a result of what's happening at a federal level, where that states are now being given lesser money, and then as a result, it's trickling down to cities and so on and so forth? Is that the reason why there's being a peel back, or is it more because of this virus?
So it's more so, I mean, given of course the federal affects everything, but
right.
It's more so dealing with the broader picture of what's happening with our economy, because we're expected to have far less revenue as a result, based on the projections that he's already been able to initiate within his own office across the entire city. I think he said it was roughly about $6 billion that could be lost for this coming year. Within the current year, we're already looking at a $2 billion loss. So it can very much so vary between now and then. Local, state, federal action, of course, is going to really be the way in which to remediate those concerns, remediate the loss in revenue. But it's going to be, of course, dependent until we then hear the changes that are coming up.
Got it. So it's okay. So yeah, it makes sense. I'm gonna look into it too deeper to see.
And tell me if I'm regurgitating too much from the articles, not making it sound like like it's something that we'll probably all understand here. Yeah. So now, with that said, I also wanted to bring up the concerns with regards to our housing. One of the things that we've particularly been seeing a lot of, I think I shared probably about 60% of the articles focused on housing alone. There's been a few different issues raised. Particularly one of the issues that I thought was very important for us to discuss tonight is particularly the bill that was presented by Mike Gianaris. Not sure if everyone has had a moment to look over it. If you can, I would ask that you open up the links that were sent in the email chains. You can also just go directly to the website where the Senate bill is kept, newyorksenate.gov, and you can type in the Senate bill and search for it. It is Senate Bill S8125A. It's really only about a a page's length for you to read over if you haven't. And I'll just give everyone a few moments just to go over it.
It's also in the assembly.
Yes, and it's also in the assembly.
So they're in committee right now. Any news about what's going on when they expect it to go out of committee?
No, I mean, unfortunately, I have not seen anything updated about the bill. You know, there's calls for it by a number of the sponsors. Looking just at the state Senate website, I'll just read off the sponsors right now. We currently have Joseph Adabo, Jamal Bailey, Alessandra Biaggi, Brad Hoylman, Robert Jackson, Todd Kaminsky, Liz Kruger, Timothy Kennedy, John Liu, Rachel May, Dominic Montgomery, John Metzger, Zellner Mary, Kevin Parker, Gustavo Rivera, Jessica Ramos, Julia Salazar, Diane Savino is also supportive of it, Jose Serrano, Luis Sepulveda, Tobian Stavisky, and Kevin Thomas. So, I mean, there's quite a hefty number of senators that have already signed on. Just want to make sure I'm counting correctly. Yeah, so that's roughly about 22, 23 if you count then Senator Gianaris. So, I mean, it looks as if it has a good chance of really just making a potential pass here. What I think is just most important is for folks to really be pressuring what's going to happen, politically. Just, I mean, if the bill is to pass, I mean, it's going to require more members, particularly 32. So, you know, they're pretty close. I think that it's something that I think we should also consider supporting tonight.
Yeah.
I think that it offers really just an alternative for many of the families that, you know, we were just discussing that are most at risk from not necessarily being able to really pay their rent bills. And with that, I'll just leave it open. Any questions, concerns, thoughts, comments?
Ariel, is it premature to do a resolution from the committee?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is it too premature to issue a resolution from the committee that the board support it? Because it hasn't really been hashed out yet, has it?
So the language itself is there. That's the language of the bill. Are you referring to anything in particular that you're saying, like, do you want to maybe hear more of what would be the negotiations?
I'm just saying that a resolution to support it.
Yeah, so I mean, so I would want to have a resolution in support of it. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to try and confirm. So I think that it's most important right now to start being proactive. One of the very reasons why I also think it's a matter of urgency. Of course, besides, you know, what's currently happening to our families, is that the Senate is actually expecting to be ending early. I'm not sure if many folks have heard. I know there's not necessarily that much data going on. I mean, much reporting going on about the Senate session. There has been reports that the governor is looking to end the session early, particularly once they pass the current budget that they are reviewing. I think it is, quite frankly, the most important time to ensure that you're passing that very piece of legislation alongside of it, because much of what happens with legislation is that it is dependent on the funding that is made available. So if, for instance, we are trying to pass this piece of legislation, what needs to happen is that there needs to be some sort of funding that is allocated towards this, particularly having the state ensure that, one, there's not just to mention oversight, but two, enforcement of the individual law, and three, following up with the individual institutions regarding the enactment of it. Of course, it would be a very costly piece of legislation. Folks are, you know, of course, bouncing back different ideas as to how they really want to ensure it's implemented. If you read over the bill, And if you've looked over some of the articles that have been put forward, Synergy and ours has been focused on trying to ensure that the banks are particularly taking the costs of the bill, so that if an individual tenant is not paying their rent as a result, this cost does not necessarily go directly to these landlords that cannot pay them, that cannot necessarily cover the cost, and not to mention the overall cost of really just the utilities and everything else in maintaining their buildings. This is going towards the banks. So I would just recommend just trying to read over it a bit more. But yes, it's something that's.
Can you put the link in the Q&A section so I can click on it?
I actually don't. I don't think I can. Oddly enough, that's.
On the bottom there is like a Q&A, so you can click on it. You have a separate window open up.
You could probably put it in the chat. We don't have chat, do we?
No, I don't think we have chat on.
No, we only have Q&A. The chat was inactivated due to some security issues.
That's
Okay.
not where you put it.
Yeah, if you even I think go on Google and just type in the bill, you should be able to get to the Senate page.
What's the bill number?
So the
Q&A
bill.
is not enabled.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Q&A is not enabled from what I can tell.
Oh. Yeah, I was trying to open it up, but I don't think I can. But I'm clicking on the little gearing on the side there.
Won't let us.
Yeah, but yeah. So just for the sake of time, so yeah, if you go onto Google, let me close this out, and you're just typing in S 8125A, you should see it's going to be the first link right at the very top. NewYorkSenate.gov.
So if we wanted to do a resolution between now and next week, are we able to do that remotely under the new world?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've particularly been talking about is the suspension of the executive, really just the executive order that suspends the open public meetings law. There's been a lot of confusion. Essentially, what's been given to us as a directive from even the borough president's office is that we are allowed to vote yes by using these services. What we are going to be just then doing right now ourselves is trying to draft it. Once there's official language that we can agree to, we can put this forward if we want ourselves, or we can bring this then to the executive committee and then also have the input of the individual chairs there in further drafting the legislation, then having the passage of that, or rather the passage of the resolution there. So, I mean, it's really up to this committee how it wants to put forward something right now, if it so chooses, or if they would like to have it, begin to craft some of the language before then bringing it forward to then the executive committee.
Good question. I mean, the easiest thing is to say we support the bill. More difficult thing is to do the whereas, and put in details, right? Because I haven't seen the details. I just saw the summary of the bill. I'm sorry.
No worries. No
Somebody
worries.
send me the link via email. It doesn't come up.
Sure. I'll just send it to everyone now. And it should be in the email chain I shared, but if you're not seeing it, yeah, no worry. Okay, reply all.
Jonathan,
Yes.
do you think we'll be able to get chat anytime soon with this license that the CB12 has? Or the,
Not for this current meeting because it was inactivated before it started. So if we want chat, it should be in a new meeting.
it should be what?
In a new meeting, not the current
Okay,
one.
okay. No, going forward, it would be nice to have because Ariel could just send us the link rather than having to email it to us and so forth. We can share.
Sure. We can enable it.
Yeah, thank you.
I just sent over the link now.
Are you able to screen share it, Ariel?
Oh yeah, I can do that too. Thank you actually for suggesting that. Okay, now share. Does everyone happen to see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Technology, right? So this is just the page that you'll see the individual Senate bill. It gives you just a very tiny description here. As you're going down, you see the individual sponsor. It gives you kind of a little explanation as to how really just a bill works through before it gets signed all the way at the end by the governor. And below, you'll see really just, well, this is the actions taken thus far. And below, it's the co-sponsors. They have details here regarding the assembly version of the bill. They're just letting know where it stands. So it's currently in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Again, the small summary of the bill, and then the individual bill itself. You can read the text. What I can do actually is I can go directly to the PDF version. Hopefully this makes it a little bit easier to see. And I'll just let you all read it for just a moment there. Like I said, it's really just this first page. The second page is just definitions of the bill.
So that's it. We can come up with something to create a resolution for this. No?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, if there are, you know, individual resolves that you would like to have included alongside of, you know, the support of this individual bill, not necessarily in relation to other legislation, but just in general, practices, policy that you want to support, or you want the state or, you know, the city to support, I think that's something that can also be addressed in the very same resolution. And I think really the conversation that we've already had today serves for a lot of the whereases that we would want to include with regards to this resolution. So if there's any individual points that either I've made or other individuals have made thus far, we can also include that in the resolution. And I'd be happy to start, you know, typing up some of the individual whereases or resolves that people want to see.
Something that I'd like to see in this is more specifics or an additional clause related to reduction of income and not just hardship. Hardship to me is not clear enough because what is the definition of hardship for whether it's a commercial or whether it's a renter? But for instance, for a commercial renter, which I know we're not talking about businesses, but the fact that you don't have your standard income coming in can put you into a situation that, despite whether you may have other resources down the road, you know, put you in a precarious situation. So, you know, maybe something to the effect of, you know, that you've either lost income or maybe you've lost a percentage of your income, because there are also people that have not been completely downsized, but well, downsized, they have been downsized. Their job is now different than it used to be. They're working less hours, but they're still employed. So what is the definition of hardship? Is it that I lost my job, or is it that I'm not getting the hours that I used to get? And then also for people who are self-employed, people who are artists who basically, or maybe 1099 independent contractors, what are the parameters for their inclusion in this, because they're also going to be affected. So.
Okay. So with at least now then, I guess for just a starting point, what would we like for the language of just the first whereas? And again, we can, and I'll just actually just pull up my own. Nope, not that one. You know, I can just pull up these individual notes that I had made earlier on the call. But if there are any individual things that stick out to you, I think, you know, just having even just this first line beginning the whereases.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. And I apologize if it's coming out particularly smaller on the screen there. I can actually just copy.
So how are the legislators defining hardship, though? Do we know?
So let's see.
I mean, I can call Jackson's office and ask him.
I can move this down. Let's see. Are they including definition of hardship? No. Okay. So it doesn't look as if they've included a particular definition for it. But I think, yeah, I think if there's just, you know, more specific questions about how hardship should be defined, you know, definitely that's something we can look to do. Just ask, you know, Robert Jackson.
Or Al Taylor, he's co-sponsor of the Assembly version.
Right.
Generis is the one who's really the sponsors, but we can. I'll research that. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you
So
think about income-driven rent?
that's an idea that, I mean, I've heard so much about. Whether America will ever support its idea, I mean, it's an interesting idea, to say the very least. I mean, that's the idea. I mean, the grand idea of affordability, right? I mean, that's something that we've been focused on within our own affordable housing that we construct here in the city of New York. It's what we've been doing all along with NYCHA. But whether or not the private market will ever lend itself to that, I mean, that's, you know, that's something. It'd have to be a much greater fight on a federal level before anything.
So I actually had a conversation with, well, before getting on this call, I was on the Right to Counsel call about the push for the suspension of rent, and having our elected support the bills that are in the legislature right now. But I had a conversation also with Ava Farkas from Met Council, and I asked her, what did she think about the feasibility of federal level rent regulation being implemented as a result of this crisis? Because originally when rent regulation started, it actually was a federal program. It doesn't exist everywhere now, but I feel like if at any point in time that it would be necessary or possible, why not now? Our entire country has been impacted by this crisis. 6.6 million people, they said, filed for unemployment. And before this, there's already been a ramping up of homelessness across the country. The amount of people who are homeless and
Sorry, Aisha, I think your mic went.
We lost her.
I think she lost connection.
Trying to get her back.
Who's gonna call back, probably?
Aisha?
She lost the connection. She has to reconnect.
Jonathan, just to ask, how do I exit screen share mode?
On the top of the screen, you're gonna see a red button saying ending sharing the screen.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry about that. I was trying to make sure I could help. Okay. Yeah, I think she might have went off. Okay, so I just for now then, I'll just return to doing screen share just so we can continue working on the draft. Okay. So yes, I input the first line, and I thought it might be good to essentially keep the second in the same whereas, just because it's dealing with the unemployment. I did not necessarily know if you or if any of you had a strong feeling about keeping some of this research here from the NYU Furman Research Center.
Why not?
Okay. Actually, did not say.
Are you copying it from the actual bill?
I'm sorry?
Are you copying it from the bill?
No, that's his research.
No, that's the research that I had conducted earlier. And I was really just discussing with you all in detail. So, pretty much all of this information, I just typed it up. And I just wanted to try and make sure that we had some information before.
I want to ask. I'm sorry, Ari. I want to ask. So, is that number? Not to question your research. I know you're thorough, but is that number completely accurate? You say you wrote. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yeah. So this is the link here. You can find pretty much all this information through this link. It's from Cranes.
Okay. Because I got I thought reports were that unemployment. So that came out today, according to CNBC. It was about, I don't know the specific number, but I thought it was 6 point something million people filed for unemployment. I didn't know it was specifically
That was
for
last
New York.
for the whole country. And
Right, for the whole country.
before that, it was 3 million. Now we're up to 10 million total.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that 7.8 million is again fairly recent then, but specifically for New Yorkers.
Yeah, so these are more so focused on the New Yorkers, and just want to make sure I'm clear here. So it's saying roughly 1/3 of the 3.2 million households. So this is specific to the households within New York City.
Got it. Wait, hold on. The 7.8 million?
I'm sorry.
Repeat that. I'm sorry. The 7.8 million is New York City.
No.
So there's three. It's referring to the 1/3 of 3.2 million households in New York City.
Got it.
Yeah, but the first whereas the 7.8 million is not New York City because New York City is only 8.5 million.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. So I figured that. So I was just like, whoa, like what's going?
It's the state, right?
Yeah, so that's referring to the state. So maybe I can change in that language to make clear that it's
The state.
Okay.
We could just start with paragraph 2.
Well, actually, it's already in the language by State Department of Labor, so that's not needed. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Supported by State Department of Labor. Okay. So whereas, just changing this, whereas NYU Furman's Research Center stated that roughly 1/3 of the 3.2 million households in New York City draw their primary income from someone who is vulnerable to income loss. I can actually just move this over as well. 34% of the city so losing income at about 40. Yeah. Nations. Okay. Is there anything that particularly sticks out to any of you that you would like to include as a whereas?
Are you planning on leaving the nail salons, beauty, and all that? This paragraph I think should go because it's more like the business development, maybe, not really housing.
I'm just leaving. So these are, so everything below here. That's just my notes. I've copied and pasted them just so that I could have easy access to use them. But yeah, apologize if that made it unclear.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. Is there any particular concerns that stick out to many of you? Well, I can also particularly mention some of the concerns that we raised that were in regards to the homeless population. That won't necessarily be specific to, oh, I think Aisha's back in. Great. Let me try and add her back. Sorry, everyone. Hi, Aisha.
Hi.
Hi there. Yeah, I was.
My battery died. I had to come over to the studio where the cord was.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, well, we were just continuing setting up some language for the resolution.
Okay.
So let me just switch back now to sharing. Okay. So yeah, I pretty much just took some of the notes as we were discussing before, broke them into about 3 different whereases for the time being. And then I was asking folks if there were any other particular whereases that might stick out to you all that you'd like to have included in addition.
So to go back to OC's point, I don't know that that would be best placed in this resolution. Maybe where I was going before was about federal level regulation, rent regulation. But there is precedent, not just in NYCHA, but in other programs, like the City FEPS program. I believe it's, if at first, depending on how a person enters the program, they may receive a voucher that pays their entire rent, but if they begin to work, they're required to pay 1/3 of their income towards rent, which depending on how much their income is, it could be that they pay all their rent, but it could be that they pay a lower portion and that the contribution then comes from the city for the rest of that. So there is a lot of precedent for that. And I also wanted to mention precedent coming from the Department of Labor in regards to what I was speaking to earlier, as far as people who have lost income. I don't remember specifically what it is. I would have to check into it, but I know that in reviewing some of their programs that I've seen where they ask, have you lost income over a certain period? And that's part of your eligibility for entering, those programs, like training programs and things of that nature. So yeah, so in this resolution specifically, I would definitely like to see, and I think I see some of that here. Is that what this is in the bottom?
Oh, I
Losing income.
yeah. So I was just mentioning, I copied over the notes that I was running over before with you all at the very beginning, just for easy access to them. But yeah, everything that's at the bottom here, this is just being spaced away, just so as to not confuse the current writing, what we've decided to put in the resolution.
Okay.
So yeah, really right now it's just those top three whereas. But I was looking to see if any of you had any particular suggestions.
Yeah. My biggest concern is those people that we know exist in our community who may not have substantiated income that is immediately verifiable.
I'm just trying to type out
and the idea of hardship, like what is hardship? How is that determined? If someone wasn't employed at all, do they automatically qualify for this? Like just all those things.
So what would you really like to have this whereas phrased as? So you were saying that many individuals are experiencing some sort of difficulty, would you say? Difficulty in?
Yeah, it would be good. I mean, I guess we don't have a lot of data yet. It would be good if we had an understanding of how people are being immediately impacted. And I guess maybe, like we know X amount of people have filed for unemployment, but do we have an idea of what kind of impact that's creating in our community? Can we get data about how it's specifically impacting our district? Which is something that I think is always good practice, because we should always be speaking from the perspective of CB12 or CD12. So I think that would be good to add for language.
So being that we don't necessarily have the community district level sort of data at the moment, what would be language that lends itself to at least trying to provide further reasoning for why we're going to pass this resolution? What would be something that you would say is much more specific to this district? Because we can still say that yes, we are realizing that individuals are particularly going to be experiencing difficulty as a result of XYZ. It doesn't necessarily need to be particular as I've put it for the first three whereases, but it could be that you're talking about individuals who are not necessarily particularly citizens with Social Security numbers. That is the main requirement right now in order to receive unemployment insurance. I'm just thinking out loud, nothing specific, but
I think maybe if I dial it back a little bit and just think of the fact that we should be talking about renters, period. Some of the original conversation that I was hearing was specifically related to rent regulated tenants, but that just doesn't meet the bar. And so I think if this addresses renters, period, and maybe you don't have to substantiate, like you just substantiate that you've lost income. I think someone who is self-employed that can't readily show that impact should not have to qualify in that way. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to think through what the possible verbiage is, but first I wanna know what exactly we're shooting for.
right.
Like what makes sense. And if we're including everybody. So give me a second.
So just while I can maybe just try and make clear what my goal is. My goal is to just really try and put forward really a number of resolves that address both the housing and the human services needs. It's not going to be, my intent was not necessarily just specific to housing alone, but to really try and create a full picture here with regards to how right now both our housing and our human services needs are being affected and what we might think might resolve many of these concerns. Given whatever it might be the data or particularly, uh, our observations right now as to how it's already impacting many individuals that are in our community. Uh, so yeah, it's not specific just alone to, I think, the legislation. We can keep a shortened or smaller version, specific to the piece of legislation if that's what everyone would like to do instead. But I had intended to just try and make sure that we kept a bit more of a fuller picture when crafting this individual resolution. Does anyone have any preference as to try and make sure that it's kept to a smaller, I guess?
Can you scroll up to the beginning?
Yeah, so
because I understand biting off what we can chew at the moment. My only concern is the current legislation has holes in it. And I know we're not only speaking to that legislation, but for instance, a 90-day period of a rent suspension doesn't necessarily mean that after that 90-day period, people are going to immediately be able to pay their rent. And so how do we address that? Maybe through I think that there should be language related to proper assessment of what the status of where people are at, even whatever is included in the legislation to protect people over whatever period, that there is also in it language that speaks to the need to have continual assessment of where people are at whatever given point. Because some people have lost their jobs or been reduced in their jobs, and they're with no guarantee of whether they're going to return to full employment after 90 days. So
better to not even say 90 days, meaning maybe 90 days is not sufficient for some people, or maybe most. So we can point that the fact that they're looking into 90 days may not be sufficient for people that may not find jobs in 90 days or will not have full income to pay rent. So I would say that as far as I'm concerned, I feel that it's important to specify why 90 days is not sufficient, as opposed to say, hey, if it doesn't happen in 90 days, then let's give them X. And so it just, I don't know, it just feels a little.
I just wanted to be a little bit more forward thinking, because knowing that the businesses, for instance, that I'm looking at, some of them are, I've heard in this last week, a dentist that is saying she is not going to weather this storm. She feels like her practice is impacted already to the extent because she was, for whatever reason, hanging in the balance. And so she doesn't see how, with the current situation, how she's going to weather that storm, which means that anybody that has lost their job in that entity is not going to have something to return to, which means that it's a bigger problem than 90 days. So I want us to just be a little forward thinking in that regard. And maybe we could include something about businesses that may be shuttered and not allowing them to return to their employment, that there's some type of safety net for those people.
Yeah. And just to also just, expand upon my previous statement, the reason why I was saying is that if we attempt to try and take a bit more of of a bigger picture, right? Not necessarily just keeping it so small to the legislation. I think that allows us to do that, right? So we can, let's just say we can say we're in support of the legislation, but be it then further resolved, we support X, Y, Z, and so forth. And I think that's really also adding to, to get at some of those points that you've made, because it's not actually just something that, you're picking at right now. People had asked the senator about this individual bill, and they had particularly been asking, well, how will someone assess, who is in need of having their rent particularly covered at this time, right? And he said that, well, I think we can leave that to the individual state assessors, right? So, by leaving something open, Cuomo can, of course, really implement things the way he wants. And that happens just with just about any bill that passes in legislation. So, yeah, I'm just trying to point this out just to like further along, like where we want to go. And yeah, so if there's any particular wants with regards to the whereases, I just want to try and continue so we can move along and just hopefully get out as much as we possibly can. And like I said, if there's a concern about trying to get everything down tonight, we can again keep the language for the time being, give it over to the executive committee to discuss further, and then pass the resolution there. So it's not necessarily required ever really that we pass something in this committee, but I just want to make sure that that's noted for everyone to know.
So as one whereas could be, whereas residents of our community will likely be impacted beyond the 90-day period, we be it resolved that
so maybe I'll keep this whereas towards the bottom, given that it seems like you're already going towards the resolve, but I'll just make note of the result here.
okay. Be impacted by underemployment or income loss beyond the 90-day period?
Oh, sorry. By income loss, and what was the other one?
Underemployment.
Okay. Like I said, I'll just try and keep that whereas towards the bottom because it seems to be going directly into it. What other whereases? Anything that sticks out? This was actually interesting. A recent survey found that 39% could not pay another month of rent if they lost their job due to the pandemic. This was actually circulated by Ava. The link I sent to everyone, she was talking about that specific survey on the interview.
By eviction, right?
Well, this is a recent survey that's focused on, just individuals struggling to pay rent within New York City. The survey was conducted. Let me just pull it up. Just want to make sure I'm remembering correctly. Property Nest, yeah.
Is that a reliable source?
Is Property Nest a reliable source?
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't say I would know exactly, how well
We probably would have cited in a research paper. Let's just say that, right?
I'm sorry?
So we likely wouldn't cite them at a research paper.
Well, the thing is, so this is an individual institution, right? So there are
Yeah, yeah.
multiple of these institutions that, they put out these individual studies and surveys and so forth, and then larger, kind of corporations, they pick them up oftentimes and they put out, and that's how you oftentimes get things from like ABC7, the Marist poll. That's like another small one that not many people know of that gets picked up. So I mean, if there's concerns about using this one in the resolution, we can leave it alone. But I would just point out that it has been being used broadly within the last 2 weeks. Like I said, Ava Farkas was bringing this up. There has also been discussions by some of the other elected officials regarding this. So I mean, yeah, it's.
I don't know that particular source, but that's why I asked. But if we're sure that this is a reliable source, then yes, we can cite them. But if we don't know, I would say I'm not sure that will be something that we want to do.
I can see if there's any other publications that have used it. Let's see if ABC7 has used it. Okay, so I'm not seeing that right away, but
Am I on?
I'm sorry?
Oh, you heard me? Yeah. I was trying to, because I moved off the screen and I couldn't tell whether my mic was still on. So the legislature that enacted the original price regulation of rents was the Emergency Price Control Act, which was signed by President Roosevelt. And it was during wartime. But it eventually expired in 1947 because of the normalization of the economy. So even if the suggestion would be that something temporary be put in place across the board because of how the economy is being impacted immediately, right? Like as we speak, and probably for time to come. I would think that it would be an ideal time to do something similar, not just because of the crisis, but because of the impacts that we've already been seeing, that we've been seeing skyrocketing rents, we've been seeing speculation of rents, we have empty buildings and apartments all over our city and across the country. These are the dynamics that are happening, as well as homelessness, extreme homelessness. So, and I don't know that would go in this resolution, but I just want to put it on the table for discussion.
What was the language you had stated before?
The legislature that was passed previously. What do you mean?
You were mentioning about what was used during wartime.
Oh, the Emergency Price Control Act that was signed by Franklin Roosevelt. And that was basically regulating rents. That was the beginning of rent control, really, rent regulation. But it eventually subsided and then stayed in place in New York as state rent controls. And there's been changes over time. And actually, while I've been on this call, Ava Farkas texted me about an interactive educational piece that's on the Right to Counsel website, I believe. So I'll pull that link. But just to get some background about, so again, maybe not today, but just to have that background of what moved our nation to have rent control and rent regulation in the first place. Because I think with what's happening, that's something that we're going to need to see. Or else people are going to be under extreme pressures financially. And they already are. We know that they already are.
Okay, so I have here the language that their Rights Council is putting on their website. Um, if we, I mean, if you'd all like, we can also include this here. Mm. But actually, is this in relation to anything particular? Yeah, it doesn't look like it's specific. It's just signing the petition. Okay, so maybe not. Um, okay, so then just going back to the whereases, I think quite frankly, just getting about maybe two more might be beneficial, and then we can jump right into the be it resolved. Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
Okay. Actually, let me just get back to this one.
Should we include language that um, that addresses the economic distress that small businesses are being, I guess, under? I don't know if there's research around that per se as of yet. I'm okay with using the what is it, the property nest as a citing source, just be for the sake of putting some type of potential numbers, like obviously, like, everything is so relatively new, so like, it's gonna be hard to find sources that are, like, quote unquote extremely fully. I've never heard of property nest, but I guess we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. But just for the sake of kind of expressing economic distress and showing that people do live paycheck to paycheck, right? Like, folks can't afford, you to be without working for more than 2 months, basically. So, and I'm sure specifically in our community, which is kind of known to be marginalized to a certain degree, that there's a lot of folks that fall under that bracket.
No, definitely. I
Yeah.
I know that I had taken the individual study from an article. I'm just trying to remember what article it was.
Yeah.
I mean, if
You
that,
mentioned you for property nest, or
yeah, I took the Property Nest study directly from a link that was included in one of the articles that was shared.
I think you mentioned it from that it came from one of the Ava article. I think that's what you mentioned. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Mm,
Was that the 611 News one?
I can actually check. Thank you, Waldies. Always helpful.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I can also just reference that when including in the resolution too. Where is that email?
Adele,
Yeah.
I found an article on the New York Times that you may want to see. It's about the renters. This is probably a more reliable source for what you were looking for.
Or the surveying, or
Yeah, the survey about the rent. Let me show it
okay.
real quick.
Yeah, sure. I'll stop sharing. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not trying to make it difficult. I just don't want, government officials that may hopefully read that, look at that, hey, don't know what is that source. So that's why when I'm thinking about resolution, I'm thinking about something that will have weight by like the reader, or potentially government officials that will read it. Like, okay, they cite that site and not like, Bob Schmob or whatever. So in order for them to take this resolution seriously, that's my thinking.
That's the very reason why I sent all these articles and links. Yeah, I'm the very same way. I think I've made it clear. I'm in government, so I know the very reasoning for it. I like my citations. So, and I'm sorry, I am trying to stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Yes, so, Jonathan, you should be able to now.
Okay. There you go. Can you see it?
My screen seems to be frozen at the moment. Sorry.
Okay, well,
Okay.
Yeah, we
now-
can see it.
yeah, that he mentioned that earlier in the call, that that's what Ava Farkas was talking about with the 39%, that 40% of New York tenants
This is live news.
probably.
Okay?
Huh?
This is live news.
No, I know, but that's the same dynamic that we're speaking about, that Ava Farkas was
Yeah,
talking.
like the same statistic basically.
It's the same numbers.
Okay, so maybe we can put the numbers in, and then Ariel, maybe you can get like legitimate source to attach to it. The New York Times, I think, is fine, but
Yes. Sorry, my Zoom for some reason is not popping up. I guess what everyone's looking at right now. I'm only seeing OC for the time being.
Go to the gallery view
Yeah.
at the top.
No, it's yeah. I think
you froze your photo. I mean, your video.
Nah, I think he's good.
I think it's probably just on my end. I probably have way too many things open on my computer.
Okay, but we can hear you.
Sorry.
I can see you too though, so no stress.
Okay. Yeah, I'm closing everything out.
So I found an additional piece of information. In 1940, over 80% of the rental housing stock was placed under rent control during World War II. So it was a wartime act. Let's see. Due to pre-control rent appreciation, force down rents for those saw greater increases in home ownership.
Are you trying to cite that in effort to try to like make this argument, I guess, more compelling? Like try to say that in the past, I guess in U.S. history, there's been government has stepped in to try to stabilize, I guess, rent or whatever, and that this is basically we're calling for them to basically kind of do that more or less right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think we were already in a place where we needed bold actions, considering,
Yeah.
The uptick of homelessness, all those things that we already talked about. So I was just looking for the genesis of the original force that put rent control in place,
Right.
and realizing that it actually didn't begin in New York. It began federally, and why. So
Yeah.
I was just trying to like track down something more specific about the economic dynamics that were happening, as well as politically, that opened up the door to make something like that feasible and possible. Of course, we had a very different president at that time, but I think there's an argument to be made.
So I guess maybe like to use that, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not seeing what you're seeing right now, but maybe you could like tweak it accordingly. Is I guess like a whereas. Hold on. Oh no, you're not sharing the whereas anymore. But I guess like the whereas.
Sorry, I can sharing again.
I mean, it's something also that I don't know how Ariel or the committee would want to handle it, because it doesn't necessarily have to go into this resolution. It may be something that would carry more weight standing on its own. Yeah, because I get, speaking to the urgency of what we're dealing with now, we definitely want to include human services and address the fact that there's these bills already in the legislature that have momentum. And sometimes adding on too many other things can kind of water down our intent and water down something that could be very profound to nudge the legislature. So maybe not to include that, but I just, again, putting it in the conversation.
Yeah, no,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I just want to get the writing down, because I think once we have the writing, it's just a lot more clearer. And yeah, we've already got a few whereases. I think it was just trying to really just try and create the language that we wanted before we start putting in the resolves. I think we've been pretty clear as to what we want resolved. It's just like I said, just writing out this resolution. Yeah, that should be it afterwards. So oddly enough, I am having trouble pulling back up now. Everything. I think it's just I've had too many programs open. I'm just gonna click out of the meeting very quickly, and hopefully I should be able to just pop back in.
If you're the host, then
I think.
Yeah, Jonathan's still here. He can still pop me back in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, you can sign out and sign in.
Aisha, I think that in terms of homelessness, that has to be a separate resolution.
It's not, homelessness is part of the argument. The focus of the resolution would be rent regulation due to the current crisis that we're facing.
So I think
when I think about it, I'm thinking this is when I ask a question about the shelter system, and in my view, shelter is just, we have to get away from shelter systems. They're gonna have to have something like, I forget where they do it, Ohio or Illinois. They have like what they call the program. I think the program name is 100,000 apartments, and which they give to homeless people, and eventually they
Yes, I've seen that. And actually that may be something that we want to speak to either in this resolution or in the resolution that I'm possibly referring to, is the fact that there is homes guarantee legislation in Albany as well, that talks about basically that people have a right to housing, that everybody deserves to have a place to live, and that it should not be some of the programs and systems that we have in place as far as sheltering people temporarily. Something that we originally intended to talk about before this happened was the soda voucher, which is not effective in that, for instance, Newark is suing the state of New York because what we're doing is we are giving people vouchers to go to other states and secure housing only for a short period. And what's happening is people are, after that period, falling out of eligibility for that and then not able to pay their rent and becoming homeless yet again. But now they're homeless in another state and becoming the responsibility of that state, which is why Newark is suing us. So we're just not creating policy that makes sense for people's lives right now. But part of that dynamic goes back to the fact that our city is more and more unaffordable. It goes back to the fact that people are not earning wages, the fact that wages have been stagnant for decades. and it doesn't match the rent increase that we've seen over those same decades. And so we need to create sound policy that makes sense, that addresses the true dynamic of what people are experiencing in their lives, and not passing the buck onto other entities.
Right, but there's so much to do with the resolution just for that I don't feel we can include everything we want in what we're doing now.
Right, yeah, but I'm putting it forward just because maybe we take a piece of it, but just because it's still part of the same dynamic that we're discussing, the impacts that people are experiencing. Yeah. So, and we can divvy up however we feel necessary, but I just wanted it to be included in the conversation.
I mean, I think it's valid points for the conversation. I think I agree with OC in the sense that maybe because it may be too much for this, but I do think that perhaps like, I don't want to, I mean, maybe like next month, as we continue to see how this crisis unfolds, we should probably put, I mean, and this maybe we could speak with Ariel about, like see like if we could then put forward a resolution at that point regarding rent stabilization. And then maybe do more research and more like stuff like that within this next month, or like as you mentioned, because I want to like look into it myself, like what you mentioned, what Roosevelt did in the past, see how that affected or how that impacted our housing market or our economic market. See if it was good, if it was bad, or whatever, the pros and cons, as it all has, and then again we could probably have a more informed decision next month. But I don't know, just me talking.
So maybe in the interim, what we could do is refer to the Homes Guarantee packet of bills,
Right.
and
like make it a whereas.
Like any whereases that are in the Homes Guarantee packet of bills that run parallel to what this resolution that we're presenting. Maybe we could just make a reference to it to kind of like, put it in the mind of the legislature or our elected officials specifically, but when we put forward this resolution.
Yeah.
So that they're reminded that there are already certain bills in progress to, make certain demands, and that this crisis further compounds those problems.
Right. Yeah, that should be fine. And maybe next month, we can do, because, the crisis is only going to get worse for the next probably 2 months in terms of the number of people getting sick and so forth. So maybe next month we can do a resolution just on what we're talking about, Aisha, on shelter and shelters and housing and permanent housing for homeless, and that has to be like a big resolution. There's a lot in this.
It is a lot for sure.
It's a lot, and we have to,
So
I think about that TED Talks, but yeah, not trying to switch gears. But yeah.
Sorry. So I just want to try and continue getting the information down here. So I wrote just the continuing idea of everyone. Whereas the New York Times is reporting based on a recent survey, and I just linked in the Property Nest survey there, that 40% could potentially not be paying rent if they lost their job due to the pandemic.
I would say maybe that about 40. I would use the word about, just because the other citation that you had 38. So I don't know. So that's just me.
Oh,
it
was
39,
about. Yeah.
Oh my bad. So it's about 40% of tenants could potentially not be paying rent, right? Because
renters.
We should add renters. Of renters. I'm trying to find something small business related, like a statistic.
I don't know that we should include small businesses here.
I understand.
Huh?
I understand why too. Like the.
I mean, we
Wait,
could.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
we could either partner with BizDev on that, or they could just pass their own resolution.
Right, because there is a lot
Yeah.
in every, there's a lot in housing and a lot in small businesses, and so from my view, I don't know, I feel they should be separate resolutions.
Ariel, I just want to remind you that the resolution will, well, actually, no, because we're doing everything virtual. As I was just saying, normally we would get our packets, but maybe where you reference the survey, state what specific survey it is so people know where you're pulling it from. But I understand that your intention is that they can click on the link, but I think it should be part of the verbiage for the link. Like the hyperlink that you created, specify where it came from.
So based on a recent survey from Property Nest?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure, does any of this stuff here seem to be something that you would be interested in putting in? This is an article that I particularly had found. Let's see, actually. I want to make sure I open it up. So there is already a number of individuals that are, oh, I hate getting these ads. There are a number of individuals that are already planning rent strikes. They are already currently organizing amongst themselves. This article just writes a little bit about a few tenants that are particularly focusing on this for the time being. Not sure if everyone wants to read it right now, but I just figured I'd share it. I think that, if folks wanted to, we could include the language to essentially just speak to how renters are already currently looking to strike, or are finding means to avoid, assuming the costs of the rent right now. I mean, it's completely up, nothing I think that would already be more powerful than what we've already included in whereases, but I just thought it was something just to share with everyone here.
I don't feel that adding that tenants considering to go on strike is helpful. It almost sounds like a threat kind of thing.
Okay.
And
Yep. Understood.
you know what
No.
I'm saying? We're trying to get the government officials to listen to this. So if we tell them, hey, renters are going to strike, it's like,
No. Yep.
that's my view. I mean, maybe other have other view. I mean, a different view.
I agree. I agree.
Okay. So I will just close this one out.
I disagree, but not completely. I'm kind of like midway on it, only because the petition that I saw today of people signing on for the movement towards suspending rent and possibly striking, it had like 90,000 people signed on already, and on that call they were putting out the call for more people to sign on to that and participate in that action. And that is a threat. And so it's not too threatened, but I think that, and maybe we could just soften our language so that we're not seeming like the threatening entity. But I think that it is worth mentioning that as many as 90,000 people already and growing have an intention to participate in, and maybe just not participate as a threat, but maybe they just can't pay their rent, and so they can't pay their rent. It's not even because like they have the rent in the bank account and they're just not going to pay it, but because it's a hardship at
Right.
this point.
So you just touched a good point. So that means that forget about the strike. It doesn't matter if there is a strike or not. If there are 100,000 people who can't pay rent, it's not that they're striking; they just can't pay rent. So I think it's even stronger because you just excluded the word strike, and you're just highlighting that, hey, there are X number of people that by X time, for example, will not be able to pay rent at all. So what is the city gonna do? Kick everyone out of NYCHA?
The
No.
problem is we don't have hard data for that, but it's a mixed bag because there are some people who can't pay rent, and there are some people who are voluntarily, as a form of solidarity, not going to pay their rent to make a broader strike, to push for what the ask is. And so all we know is that we're looking at 90,000 people that have signed on, that have said that they are willing to participate in that. And so maybe we don't include the word strike, but maybe we include that according to the Right to Coalition, there's indications that X amount of people are supportive of, you know, a rent suspension and participating in demanding that. You know what I mean? But
Okay.
yeah.
I will go with that kind of language because
So,
you know,
whereas,
said it again, Aisha.
So Right to Counsel petition indicates that, I think it was like 89,000 last I looked at it.
I can open back up.
And, or you could say 90K plus, because it's likely to grow. Part of the phone call tonight was a call to action to increase the visibility of that movement. Have indicated that they likely will not. I mean, and we already know that 40% number is out there. It's been, you know, covered in multiple media outlets.
So 40%
so it's
will not be able to pay rent when? Next month?
No,
Or
April
already?
1st. Yeah.
yesterday. Yeah, yesterday.
So it's not even a futuristic thing. You're saying that already 40% of renters, wait a minute, it's renters in general or NYCHA or Section 8 or what?
So, I mean, I guess just adding that according to the Right to Counsel petition, near 90,000 people have signed on in support of a rent suspension, is, you know, or the fact that that's growing, that effort on the part of Right to Counsel. And Right to Counsel is known because Right to Counsel is what got the Right to Counsel in New York City to defend tenants' rights in housing court because of the amount of evictions that people were already facing. And the legislative knows that. So I think including that, you know, they're credible, they're a credible entity.
So, okay, so right to counsel. Does 90% of people that sign that's the 40% that they're talking about, or we're just talking about two different things?
No, those are two different things.
Yeah.
The petition is completely separate from just really the assessment as to who can pay rent and who cannot.
Okay. So
Those are individuals that are particularly signing on saying that, what was it, that they don't believe they should be paying the rent at this very moment.
So the whereas before the 90,000, we're saying that 40% of renters could potentially not be paying rent if they lost their job. Oh.
Yeah, if they lost their job due to the pandemic.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that.
So that references the inability, but the next whereas referencing that there's a movement, whether they can pay or not, leaning towards, and we're not going to speak to it. It's just a creative way of referencing the strike. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Ariel?
Yeah, I think it works well.
Okay.
I think this generally works. I don't know why, and tell me what you all think, but I just feel like I want to have one more solid whereas and then just break down straight into the be it resolves. You know, I'm kind of thinking right now, we should have just a few lines for the be it resolved. And what we can also do, just because it seems like you know we're still all kind of thinking through everything here, we can come back to this for the executive committee and get more things. But you know, I want to hear from all of you as to whether or not you feel like we should push and get all of this written out right now, or what do you feel?
I think that the
Because I mean, it is good conversation. I'm just trying to make sure that we have, you know, more than enough time to get it all in.
I feel that with the direction that this resolution is going to, we probably can vote on it right now, and we can kind of go back and forth in terms of the actual language. But you're right, we should have at least one or two resolves as to what are we asking. Should, you know, should put a language here.
Oh well, I think we're all clear on the first one. Manhattan Community Board 12. Oops, sorry. 12 is in support. State Senator.
What about utilities?
Hold on a second, Aisha.
Oh, I'm just writing out. Sorry, just writing out the first. Is it two ends? I can't even remember.
Okay, you'll get forget about the
Yeah. So 1.8. I think it was 2.5. 8. $90. Okay. Any other be it resolved?
Real quick.
Yeah.
So sorry, guys. Should another whereas be, because I know you mentioned you wanted another one, should it mention the Cuomo moratorium that he placed on evictions? And how the fact that, so his moratorium is that you won't be evicted for 90 days, but you will still have to pay back your rent that you don't pay. And I know that this is bills in support of you don't have to repay that rent basically, but I think that should we make it a point to address that within a whereas, like speak to like, hey, whereas Governor Cuomo places 90-day moratorium, placing renters to basically pay back their rent, and this bill basically supports the fact that we don't have to pay back that rent. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
Well,
actually. Sorry, what was that?
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that was actually one of the strongest arguments that people kept making, or maybe not the strongest, but specifically one of the most repeated arguments that I heard across pretty much every article. So yeah, if that sounds like something everyone agrees on.
Because it sounds like this bill is like speaking to that specifically, like, you know, trying to help mitigate those deferred payments, quote unquote.
So
OTC is like she wants to say something.
So I'm on the Right to Counsel website. There's part of this that I don't think would be effective in this, but something that I think would be is addressing utility payments. Remember that, I don't know if everybody saw the video that went viral in Florida of one of the commissioners in Florida demanding that concessions be made for people's utilities to not be turned off during this crisis. I think we should include that.
Yes.
And it's actually something that Right to Counsel is asking for as well. But what they're asking for also is forgiveness of rent that has been accumulated over the course of the crisis, as well as utility payments that has been accrued over the course of the crisis. So I don't know what everyone's thoughts are in regards to that, but just so that you know that that's what Right to Counsel's demands are.
Yeah, I'm in support of forgiving the accrual that is in relation to the utilities. Is that
Yes. I think so.
okay? Hearing no nays.
By the way, I'm writing the whereas for you, the one that I just try to like speak, mention.
Okay.
If that's
Yeah.
something that you want to include, and we could discuss it, I guess, together.
Yeah. If you want to change the language, let me know. And I mean, if I'm also miswriting the exact language, definitely like, yeah. And if you want, you just send it to me in an email. I'll definitely change it, and then just keep it there.
Waldis, did you suggest something that I missed just now?
No, it's just regarding the premise, basically, of the bill. Like, it's basically going to address, like, whereas Governor Cuomo placed a 90-day moratorium, so on and so forth. But I'm just like tweak it, and then I'll say it to you guys, and then we could take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to add one more whereas, if possible. Can we get data from the census about, I mean, I think we have to make a point that this is not Tribeca or Riverdale. So I'm thinking about adding the income data from the census that will show that, percentage of people that work, but their income, and maybe they work more than one job, and the income as is right now, even though they're paying rent, is not sufficient.
Let me.
I'm just trying to think.
I was alluding to something along that lines earlier, but hearing what you're saying now, I think a point that should be made is that the census data or any other surveys that have been done over time do not reflect at all what is the current state of affairs and the impact. We don't have the data, but we know enough to know that it's not looking good. I think something to that effect should be included so that those past numbers are not what's referenced. You know what I mean?
If you take the 5 years estimate from the census, that will give you some sort of an indication. And, you take like 5% plus minus 5%.
I mean, I wouldn't go based off that. Okay. But what I can show is, like, for instance, here we have estimates on certain things. If you're particularly looking for like income levels, if I remember correctly, I think they did still have them broken down, but
you know what could make sense? Including what we've had put in many past resolutions, which is the fact that our community is already extremely rent burdened before this crisis, and that this crisis is only serving to exacerbate that.
Aisha, you're a genius. You actually just reminded me of another part I was thinking, because one of the articles, and I could be wrong, it might have been the New York Times article that we just were looking at, but I think it had specifically been saying that nearly half of New York renters are rent burdened.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been saying that.
Yeah.
So if it's half citywide, what is the percentage in our district? Probably higher.
I believe it was a little above 50.
It can't be just a little above.
No, it's very high. I used to memorize this for my last job. I wouldn't be able to remember it anymore. But it is very high, and there is particularly, I want to say, I'm sorry I can't remember the number, but it was roughly about a third that you could look at and were considered severely rent burdened. So Yeah, I wish I had that information. Um, actually, I can hopefully maybe look up something on it.
Oh no.
Oh, there you go. Near curbed.
Okay, but that's citywide. I was looking at data for our district,
Mhm.
Um,
and I'm sure
It's in the Department of Health community profile, which I was trying to pull up now.
yes.
you know, at least some of this data can probably we can probably find it from land use resolution about the rezoning. But
It's in housing resolutions.
okay.
We've referenced it a number of times.
Okay.
Aisha, I swear you're bringing me back to stuff that I just completely forgot about.
Okay, so there is another whereas. That's good. That's totally fine.
Let's see here. I completely forgot about all this data.
You know offhand what's percentage of residents of our district are elderly, depend on fixed income?
You can definitely see the elderly here. This is also the unemployment rate as is. So the unemployment rate was already 12%, and
In our
rent
district?
burden was 53%. There we go.
In our district?
Yeah, this is the community health profile for CB12.
Here?
It's 53%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Sheesh.
All right.
Something else that Rights to Counsel has in their demands.
Yeah, we definitely need to add that. I'm sorry. You said just wanted to-
the rent burden. Yeah.
Yeah.
That the existing rents should be frozen, but that tenants should have the right to renewal, that no landlord should be denying any tenant the right to renew their lease under the current circumstances, because we just can't afford to have people displaced at this current time during this crisis. Like my lease is up to be signed this month. So, and I'm rent stabilized, so I don't have to worry about it. But if that were not the case, the idea that I could be displaced because my landlord says, hey, maybe he just wants to get more rent from somebody else, is something that we can't sustain right now.
Sorry, I'm just trying to like move this around a little bit just to make it a little bit more. And I'm sorry, I just want to try and make sure I'm not missing anything that you all wanted to include. OC, you were asking particularly for the percentage of seniors that might be on fixed incomes.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm just trying to follow along. So forgive me if I'm missing some of the things you're individually going into.
Real quick, sorry, Ariel. I know you're moving along to OC's point, but just to add to that whereas that you just wrote down, should you make mention of that this is prior to this COVID? So meaning that has already existed prior to COVID, meaning that, obviously like the likelihood of this number increasing is going to be higher, right? So maybe perhaps like writing the Department of Health community profile shows that prior to COVID, 53% of the community board was rent burdened, and 20%, I think what was the number, 20% were in poverty? Is that the number?
Also another good point. Yes,
Right.
20%, and also the unemployment rate, like you were mentioning.
Yeah. So
That's prior. Yeah, it's a good point.
And Waldis, we have the resolution that you did for the end of the session last year.
it's not benefits.
Yeah, that has a lot of that data about the
About,
state of
you're right. You're right. Actually, I
poverty
should probably-
guidelines and all that stuff.
You're right. You are right. I have that. I have that Governor Cuomo whereas, by the way, too. If you want it now, or we could wait till after. I don't want you to forget about OC.
Sorry, OC. Sorry, I just want to make sure I don't miss OC.
No worries. But
Didn't we
it's already written.
elderly, the fixed income, did we have here?
So let's see. I'm pulling back up the document again. What was the portion of it? Let me see if I can find anything on the seniors particularly. Oh, that is hilarious. I did not know this existed.
What?
People reporting cockroaches in their households.
Okay, that's not related to this resolution.
Oh wow, Taunville has 0% of cockroaches. That's nice. Let's see. Huh, I would have figured there's a bit more information on seniors here. Okay. Well, this is definitely something for the health community. Yeah, shoot. I don't know. I mean, there's probably more information as to seniors. It's probably just not going to be on this
Okay.
one here.
Do you want me to look it up in the census, the 5 years estimate from?
If there's like a 2017, I think that's the last year that they had the ACS study done. That's probably like the closest one, and we can probably use the data from that one just to give it like, you know, as realistic for a statistic there.
So I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. And Waldis, you said you wanted to do the language for Governor Cuomo's whereas, right?
Yeah. So what I wrote down, should I just email it to you, or do you want me to just speak it out word by word? What's
Either
better?
or.
Spell it out.
I'm sorry.
Spell it out now.
Say that. All right, cool. So I wrote, whereas Governor Andrew Cuomo placed a 90-day moratorium on evictions, but is asking renters to pay back landlords after the 90 days are done, only causes further deferred financial distress and does not provide relief to renters.
Yeah, just send me the language better yet. But also,
you,
it's not 90-day moratorium on evictions. It's 90-day moratorium on mortgage payments.
Right.
Got it.
Just yeah, just so you also know when you're telling you know, your very superb colleagues at work.
Got it. So should I delete evictions then, or and just replace it with mortgage payments?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's right. the moratorium on mortgage payments right now.
Do we know what percentage of residents of our district will not be able to pay their mortgage payment next month because they're out of work? Oh. That's
So
what I'm trying.
that's kind of like another niche kind of statistic, because the thing is, it's so homeowners, right? They're not necessarily like a ginormous bulk here, but um, you know, I'm sure there's probably some way to find that information. I'm not too certain.
Well, generally speaking, they're probably in better shape because if they had a mortgage that is not um, interest-only mortgage, and they paid a few bucks for the walls, if it's a co-op or whatever, mostly co-op or probably here, they paid something towards their apartment, so they can't be just kicked out as easily. It's slightly different.
What I will say I do remember seeing was that from that Property Nest survey, there was more security or more individuals that felt secure with their housing status that were particularly seniors. Those that were, and actually I can just scroll down and show you because I wrote it down too. It was particularly women and young adults that were found to be particularly at higher risk of not being able to make the rent. Um, and the thing is, because seniors also rely on stable incomes that they're going to be getting guaranteed regardless, that's, I guess, the stability that is more likely had with seniors than younger younger adults.
Oh,
So
so it doesn't matter. We don't need to include the elderly on fixed income
I'm,
because
I don't want to say it doesn't matter. I'm sure it matters. I didn't see a specific article that was focusing on the hardship that might be had, particularly with seniors. Um, but I'm sure there's most likely that data. Yeah, but we can definitely look, for something if that's what you really want to have included there.
no, no. I mean, the more I
so
think about it, I don't think it's doesn't have
so based on previous discussion, something that it just occurred to me is not elucidated in any of these discussions. When we talk about rent burden, 53% of people are rent burdened, right? Um, we're not really specified how much they're rent burdened, but there are seniors that I'm aware of who may get like Social Security, for instance, and 90% of their Social Security check goes towards their rent. Um, I don't know that I've seen specific data about how much of a burden that population may have, but
Yeah.
it's, I think it's something that
but that's
it
not
would be good to have more data on exactly how
related
people are
to
impacted,
these
not just that they're rent
crises.
burden.
That's not related to this crisis. That's generally speaking.
Yeah, no, but what I was saying is stating that people are rent burdened
Mhm.
doesn't go far enough. And unfortunately, we don't have, I haven't seen data that specifies, but you were mentioning seniors, and that just occurred to me that that's part of that dynamic.
I mean, I am thinking that if we do want to include a certain whereas or a certain be it resolved that is in relation to senior services, what I would definitely point out is that without a doubt, I don't even think I'd have to even look this up to know this. There has been definitely a cutback in the senior services because if one, people can't access senior centers, if two,
Oh my
people
gosh.
cannot necessarily get their individual caretakers to be able to come to their homes, I mean, that's a very ginormous loss in service. Um, Given that there's, requirements for social distancing, it cannot necessarily be alleviated even if we did have more funding available. But, um, you know, even just making sure that seniors are even getting their meals, I think that's something that people have been talking about in the news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because seniors can't leave their homes. They can't go shopping. Many are afraid to go outside. So maybe supporting institutions such as like Meals and Wheels would be something that's like also very helpful at this time.
Yeah.
That's not this resolution. That's the thing.
Yeah, because this resolution is more specific to the bill.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
it's,
is and it isn't. But
Yeah, no, I feel y'all. I feel y'all completely. I want to support, like, you know, you gotta
yeah.
support it, but
yeah,
name drop Meals on Wheels is, you know, is
we're
the question.
I think we're raising really important things, but then it's starting to get into the weeds
Right.
of those specific topics. And we don't honestly, to my knowledge, have specific data. It would be interesting to know if the aging committee has more specific data where that's concerned. But I am seeing, like, there's one woman that I'm advocating for right now. I don't remember her age, but she's an elderly woman who is dealing with severe illness, different she's got diabetes. She's also dealing with kidney issues. And part of my advocacy for her was trying to facilitate local dialysis for her. So she's not traveling into the Bronx just to get dialysis multiple times a week, where she's now exposed to multiple people during this crisis. And also the dynamics with her home attendant coming to her house and all that stuff. Which, for instance, the home attendant was coming to her house without gloves, without a mask, and was coughing. So there's just so many layers. There's so many layers. So I mean, maybe that's something we could partner with aging on in the future. But yeah. But one thing I did find was the statistic that you put in the SNAP able-bodied resolution, which is 26% of people in our district receive assistance.
Let me pull that up.
I don't remember if that was specific to SNAP, but basically 48,826 as of January 2019 were SNAP recipients.
Wow, I didn't even know we had that.
Yeah, 32,439 households receive assistance in accounting for 26% of the CB12 district.
Do we not questioning? Just want to know. Does anyone remember where we got that information? Because I'm sure we had it from somewhere. It must have been one of the flyers that we were reviewing.
No, I can re-forward it. I actually researched it and forwarded it to Waldy's, and then he pulled from it to create his reso.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, if anything, I'll take the language. I can put it in the whereas.
So something that I do want to, so by the way, Ariel, I sent you the whereas language, but I did make mention, and this is kind of generally, borderline general is another whereas, unfortunately / fortunately. But it's whereas I wrote, whereas due to rapid increased unemployment rates, there will be an increase in the likelihood of people accessing public benefits such as SNAP benefits, Medicaid, and SSI. Now, I don't know if we want to be a little bit more specific there, add like some type of statistics, but I did, kind of general, but I do want to make mention of like the fact that, and we spoke about it before, how the fact that there's more unemployment rates is, as the result is that now city, state agencies, federal agencies are going to now be impacted by, due to this. There's going to be increase in Medicaid enrollment. There's going to be increases in SNAP benefit enrollment, and more than likely, SSI as well, or Social Security period. But I don't know if we should touch on that. But I sent that to you too, Ariel. So I don't know if you want to add that, but I want to touch base with everybody here to see if that's something that we want to include here as well. I don't know if it's pertinent to this resolution per se, because this resolution is specific to the bill. But yeah.
So I think part of what Ariel's intention, the way that the agenda is framed, is that we're looking at the impacts of COVID. And while we did also juxtapose it to this bill that is being suggested in the legislature, I think that it would be prudent for us to address anything that we see that's urgent, that is being impacted by this crisis, which now it occurs to me, I know for a fact that HRA made some concessions to application process, so that it's not as much in person, and that you couldn't be sanctioned or receive any violations for not attending certain appointments during the crisis. I don't know how long that's for, but I don't know how much of that is across the board in other agencies. Like, does it apply to Section 8? Does it apply to NYCHA applications for housing? How far has our city gone to make sure that this crisis isn't further compounding people's hardship and access to resources during the crisis? So maybe something to that effect, language. Yeah. And I'm assuming this is being recorded so that it can be shared, right? So.
Yeah, so all of this has been recorded the entire time, which is actually the thing I'm liking about this right now.
Yeah.
Because haha, minutes. But
don't we know it?
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty stacked number of whereases here. What I guess we can try and focus on now is just maybe putting a line or two for the resolves, and then what else would everyone be okay with 2 more resolves?
How many resolves we have right now?
We have 2. So one is in reference to the rent payments. The other is in reference to the forgiveness of utilities bills that were accrued during the pandemic. And then, of course, we can find ways to include here a bit more about the human services.
I mean, again, if we don't need to include it, you should, up to y'all. But it's just a suggestion because it is something that will be impacted. But yeah, just wanted to recognize that. But again, your world, guys. It's your world.
You're part of it, man.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, I'm just in general thinking, do I want to include something here with regards to the immigrant population?
Or the marginalized population?
Just because, so, we have part of the whereas, and this is actually where it's good. So we include the increased need for unemployment insurance. Actually, let me just put unemployment insurance.
Unemployment insurance, right.
Yeah. Just to make it super clear. Increase. I'm not changing it, I swear. I'm just trying to make it clear here.
No stress, man. No stress.
Would it be fair to say that we would be in support of increasing funding made available for human services offered throughout the city?
We are demanding.
Yes.
No.
No, I mean, I'm I'm just trying to get the language here. So we're in the Manhattan Committee Board. Oop, I actually wrote this wrong.
No, say OC is demanding.
No, because if you're in support of something that doesn't exist, then I mean, um, nobody proposed. Does anyone propose to increase funding for that? For services, and we're talking about human services. Is there any bill somewhere in the making? Because if there isn't, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
Good point.
it's very well possible. I mean, there's just so much going on right now.
right.
And you know, from the stuff I was looking at, I hadn't particularly seen a bill specific to it. The human services relief that I was mentioning earlier was from the federal level in that $2 trillion bill. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm sure there probably is. I just haven't seen something specific from the state or city levels here.
That's crazy.
And then we can put including those very services as mentioned. Well, actually, Medicaid is Medicaid. That's the one we're looking at a cut for.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And actually,
Not many people in our district.
sorry, in my head I was thinking of making a jab with Cuomo, but I'm like, no, I won't do that. Including SNAP, Medicaid, and SSI.
Free healthcare for all.
Oh.
Steve Simon will pop up out of nowhere.
No, actually not for all. I disagree with for all. I'm thinking free healthcare for people that either have no income, obviously, but those that have income below, I don't know, 200,000 or something.
I see. You're going with the Warren approach.
Which approach?
Warren, Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, that was hers. I don't remember. There were so many of them.
No. She supported Medicare for all, but with regards to tuition, she was supporting it being up to like a certain income, and then she said afterwards, wealthy families should be essentially being able to support themselves and pay for their own education. But anyways, is is there another resolve right away that we can get into? I don't think we. Sorry, what was that?
Did we remember to include about the utilities?
Yes.
Yes, the second whereas here.
Okay.
I mean, if there's no need to put more, I just figured I should ask.
Good. You mind scrolling up?
Not at all.
Can you fix the link for the second whereas? The NYU, this is research,
Oh.
yes.
Thank you.
You don't have to do it now. Just-
She demands you do it now.
no.
Actually, I should have written in here unemployment insurance.
The only comment I think I have left is that whereas the last whereas you have before the be it resolved, is it gonna stay like that with the ellipsis?
I was trying to remember, Aisha, with regards to the whereases, are each and every one of them supposed to end with the ... Because that's what I thought it had been before.
No, it's supposed to be like end, like semi. Is it semicolon?
Oh yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's what I was trying to remember.
Gotcha.
And then you have to end it with end. you know, and
Okay.
then exactly all of them. Just yeah.
Oh, actually, so that after the last one, it should be the comma, and then it goes to be it resolved.
And therefore,
Oh.
no, therefore be it, and then you start resolve, resolve, resolve.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
So I'm about to forward that email, but you had asked where we obtained the reference to the amount of SNAP recipients in our district. It was in the HRA district resource statement, as well as in the Children's Committee. Where is that at? Of course, I lost it now. Let me forward it. Yeah, the HRA district resource statement from January 2019. And I lost it.
Okay.
Here's another end after the 90 days. The next, your cursor is right.
Oh.
Yes. Bingo. And also the next one after that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
it's semicolon, not comma.
For the whereases or
Yeah.
oh.
No, for the end. Oh, right.
Okay. Or okay. Well, these when you make your run for office, remember this night, okay?
That's not happening. That's hilarious, man.
Just remember us.
Oh, man. By the way, guys, I say that joke between me and Harry. It's not happening at all. At all.
Say no
Too
more,
sticky for my liking.
All right, so that should be it. And like I said, no pressure. We don't necessarily add anything more. If that is everything that you would like to have included, I am happy to just share it with everyone. And we'll have crafted a very good resolution.
What are we naming it?
Good question, actually. I don't know why I had the sick ironic joke of writing it as CB12 CARES, as in the CARES Act. But yeah, no.
So resolution in support of.
Oh, I thought you meant the actual name. I was just gonna write community protection.
Yeah, but the convention for writing a reso generally starts with resolution ...
No, yeah. So resolution in support of community protection. Right.
Mhm.
That's what you mean, Aisha?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I thought we were just putting a name at the top of it, but yeah, resolution in support of, I guess I can actually rewrite this as.
Do we want to say like a community protection due to COVID-19?
Yeah. Or from the.
I would say protections.
Oh, Okay, I see.
Or that works too. I didn't see what you were doing.
Okay,
Protecting the community?
yeah. Resolution support of protecting the community from the aftermath of COVID-19.
It's not yet aftermath. It's
True, we're still in it.
yeah, no, and the problem with the reason why I'm saying it is because we may end up having another resolution once this is all done to see how can we, I don't know, when the next corona coming, the next wave will come in, maybe we'll need different things in our community. So
Mm.
that may be like not a revision, but like almost like a corona 2.0 or something, resolution.
About current impact of COVID-19.
Sure. Okay. And I think we should be okay now.
So
Okay. I think I should be good here. Does anyone else feel that there was anything else needed? I think at some point, I'm sorry?
No. I think we're good, but what are you going to say?
I was saying, I think at just some other point, I'll come back to this and just check my wording. I'm sure it might look very odd in certain places, like right here. But it's probably just because I've been staring at the screen. So,
Can we have it resolved about our definition of hardship? I don't know if there's a legal dynamic to that, but how are we making sure that it's the net is wide enough?
no, but it's more than this. It's the hardship of our community, not the hardship of Soho. So that's a little different.
Well, that's what our whereas is speak to the hardship of our community. But my concern is that the current bill, like we mentioned the bill, but like for instance, with the rent reforms that passed, after rent reforms were passed and all the work that was done, there were holes and there were a lot of questions as to exactly the application of certain clauses in the bill. And honestly, having talked to assembly people and senators, they didn't know how it applied. And to me, that's problematic because it's it's like not going far enough to make sure that you're addressing your intention. So that I just want to make sure that we shed light on, well, who are you talking about when you say people having hardship? What is hardship? So I mean, I know we've outlined some of the hardships, but
the question is that a resolve or that's a whereas?
So I think just to try and like not dig too deep, but also still, yes, take into account that like if we don't necessarily point out how there can oftentimes be inconsistencies with some of the legislation, it might just make sense then to really just write out what groups that we're concerned about, not necessarily being addressed in this legislation. So maybe if there's particular groups that you are thinking about, I can, of course, write them right on into this be it resolved.
So maybe if we mention the, and I don't know what the exact data would be, but market rate tenants, the current state of rents for market rate tenants.
Actions.
I mean, because we talk about being rent burden, right? But the vast majority of dialogue that happens in Albany that I've seen recently has been surrounding rent regulated tenants. And
No,
there's not really a conversation about what's happening with market rate tenants. What's happening when you are phased out and you're no longer a rent regulated tenant. You know what I mean? So, and this crisis right now, immediately, people who are market rate are probably in some of the most dire situation because their rents are higher.
yeah, I completely agree. I forgot to share with all of you, but there was an article particularly referencing a landlord that's actually worth $1 billion. He decided to start increasing, given I won't go into the article because we'll go too deep into the rabbit hole, but essentially it was just a landlord that was trying to take advantage of his tenants having their lease already coming to an end in a market rate apartment. And because of the number of healthcare professionals across the country coming to New York, he actually decided he was going to raise the rent by 30% just to ensure that his tenant left so that some other healthcare worker could then come in and start renting from him.
Yeah, that's illegal.
No, it's actually not. And that's the worst part about it. Because if you're in a market,
by 30%,
if
He can
you're
rent to buy whatever he wants. It's market rate.
yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the worst, you know.
That's the problem with absence of regulations. They can do whatever they want. Did we include something about renewals, making sure that people get renewals?
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did. Did you want to like a specific resolve?
Yeah.
I don't think that you can raise the rent for more than 2%, even if it's a marketplace I'm talking about. I mean, like market rent.
No, so it's here. I'll just get the article.
I've advocated for people who, in a rent regulated apartment, the landlord attempted to double the rent, and that's in a rent regulated apartment. And honestly, I believe he succeeded, but there were other dynamics. There were like MCI sewn into that and all that kind of stuff, but just giving it as an example of rent doubling. So I would imagine in market rate, even more so.
I'm pulling up the article. And yeah, you can, oh, sorry, it was 25%. But still, that's, you know, way more than that 2-3%.
Is that in your email that you send with all the links?
I don't think I sent this one, but I can just send it. You know, but yeah.
We're not talking about commercial rent here.
No.
I really don't think it's legal.
Market rate.
This is market rate rent, just for residential apartments and whatnot.
Okay. I'm gonna read it. That's interesting.
Yeah, so right on. Okay, so with that being said, I'm just going to share this. We can include then, sorry, I'm trying to make sure everyone's in. We can include that piece there for the whereas. She didn't get Marshall.
Okay, here, this is from, it's from Street Easy. If you live in a market rate apartment, one that is not rent stabilized or rent control, your landlord can increase your rent any amount he wishes. That's what it says.
Okay, so I just sent the article. Just to quickly go back, because we're running on a pretty long amount of time here.
See how much fun we have? We didn't even realize we are in a meeting for 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reason why, you know, I knew this is just a lot to try and go through, break it down. But yeah, I definitely appreciate you all taking the time. So Manhattan Community Board 12.
I just want to make note that Bruce's background has been the highlight of this whole.
Yes,
Video
absolutely. Yeah, I've been asking questions in my mind, like, is that painted on? Is that like,
Right, like what's going on there?
It's a painting by Tony Serio, who's a local artist, lives up the block.
Nice.
is that on your wall?
It's hanging on the wall, but I took a photograph of it to make the virtual background.
Oh,
Got it.
cool.
Got it. Nice.
You know, at first I had you could see it was a painting, and Lynn said, "Oh, make it the whole background. People think that you're living in a virtual
Oh,
view of
Right,
the."
like this is your backyard. Yeah, like
Which
you
is,
know, looking out your window.
well, thank you, Wallace. I appreciate it. Tony will
Yeah,
appreciate
for
it. He's a great
Oh,
artist,
absolutely,
great guy.
absolutely.
Yeah, he's one of the local guys.
Wow. Tracking chart. No.
yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely as much as they want OC. I just confirmed it on two other places.
That's insane.
Is that fair language? The Hand Committee Board 12 is in support of protections for market rate renters so that they do not have rent price gouging being able to displace them, or landlords, so that landlords cannot gouge their rents. That fair?
Yeah, and the renewal clause.
Oh, yes. Is in support.
Would that be under the same result? Or that should be a separate?
Could be a separate one because that's specific to market rate. Well, yeah, actually, rent stabilized is automatically entitled to a renewal. So yeah, it is specific to market rate.
Miss the pandemic.
Does anyone know what percentage of the?
I'm sorry?
It's just a question. Does anyone know what is the percent of renewing rental apartments in our district that are rent regulated as opposed to market rate?
Wait, I didn't hear that. What did you say, Elsie?
Do you know what the percentage of the rental apartment in all the apartments in our district that are rent regulated as opposed to market rate?
It's pretty high. It's almost around 80%.
80% what?
That are regulated.
That are regulated?
Yeah. We have the highest stock in New York State.
We do.
New York State?
Yeah.
In our district?
Yes. Yeah. And to be very specific, in our assembly district, I don't want to argue for community district because I don't know exactly if it would be like, Harlem has a higher percentage or Inwood and Washington Heights, but
you can go by zip code.
But yeah, I'll just say our assembly district, it has the highest stock of rent regulated units.
It's 72.
Yeah.
You found it?
Carmen's pretty proud to always mention it. So that, I think that should be mostly everything that we were talking about before. Is that fair to say? Are we okay with this resolution?
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay. Hearing no nays.
Right, so how
We
are
have to
we voting on
motion to, yeah.
I move it be
I'm
adopted.
sorry.
who is moving?
Bruce, you just moved it?
I did. I motion.
Okay, you
That
make
second.
All right, let's call to a vote. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
aye.
I can't
Aye.
raise your hand on this thing.
I'll take the sounds, all sounding unanimous. And I'll actually just note the vote here. How many of us are even on the call? Let's see here.
This is 6.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Not counting Jonathan. He's not really on the call.
And actually, sorry. Here, let me just stop sharing just so I can close this all out.
Jonathan can vote though, can he?
I think he's on mute.
But I'm here.
Can you vote, Jonathan, for this?
He's a board member.
Yeah, why not?
Board member. Wait, are you on this?
He
I
can,
I don't belong to this committee. I don't know if you guys.
he can vote as a non-committee member.
Yes,
Hey, I agree.
okay.
Okay, so what I'll just do here is I'll put 5 in favor, 0 against, and then I'll also put public vote, 1 in favor. Against. Then
I think it's 6. It's 6 in favor, right? It's 6 of us here.
yeah, but I'm breaking it down just so it shows the committee vote. Yeah. Okay. With that being said, I can save this and want to say congratulations to everyone on helping draft this wonderful resolution.
The first one on Zoom, right?
I think so.
Congratulations.
Breaking barriers.
It's a first.
Yes. And I will name it on my computer as the Community Protection Resolution. All right. And it is now 14. Okay.
Oh, hold on. I think, no, that's old. Sorry.